We are in the 32nd week of ordinary time, and there are only 34 weeks in ordinary time. So we are coming to the end of time, ordinary time, the end of the church's liturgical year. And as we head towards the end, the scripture readings that we're listening to start to speak about the end as well. So today we're hearing about the resurrection, what happens after we die. Next week, we'll hear about what happens when Jesus comes again in glory. And on the last week of the year, the last Sunday of the year, we'll hear about Jesus, the universal King who holds all things in being. So today we meet Jesus having a run-in with the Sadducees. So the Sadducees we hear quite regularly, the scribes, the Pharisees, and the Sadducees, they come up quite a lot as those who oppose Jesus. But this is actually the first time and the only time in Luke's gospel that we hear of them challenging Jesus. The Sadducees challenge him on the issue of the resurrection. And the scripture tells us they do not believe in the resurrection nor in angels or spirits. They themselves began as a sect around 200 years before Jesus, at the time when the first reading that we've heard was written and it is describing. It was a time when the Greeks had overrun and overtaken Israel, and they were trying to force people to abandon their Jewish faith and take on the Greek faith, the Greek religions, to take on paganism. And many compromised with their faith. Others remained faithful. We're hearing here of those who remained faithful. But people compromised, and those who compromised actually were the people who started the Sadducees. They were people of power, originally they came from the descendants of the high priest Zadok. And because of their power and their compromise, they were able to then have the kind of sole rights to being high priests and the priesthood in Jerusalem. So it gave them a lot of power, a lot of political power, a lot of religious power. So a lot of the rich and big landowners, they were also Sadducees. Sadducees did not believe in life after death. They did not believe in the immortality of the soul. They did not believe in a punishment or reward for a bad or a good life. They did not believe in the resurrection of the body. And so they're here challenging Jesus. They're also, they did not only challenge Jesus, they also had regular run-ins with the Pharisees who did believe in all those things. So the Sadducees were actually very conservative. They only looked at the only book that they would take their teaching from was the book of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And for them, it was, if it's not in the Pentateuch, then it's not a doctrine that we have to believe. It's the Pentateuch and the Pentateuch alone. That's it. Anything extra, the oral traditions that sort of sprang out afterwards, they wanted nothing to do with that. And so conservative in their faith, they didn't believe in these newfangled thoughts about life after death because they thought that wasn't in the Pentateuch. And so resisted these things. Here we have Jesus. They know that Jesus believes in these things, and they're trying their best to undermine and challenge him. And so they come with this story about the woman and who marries these brothers. And it's taken from the book of Deuteronomy, I think it is, where this teaching about marrying the wife to have children comes from. So they challenge him, and Jesus comes back very clearly, very, very strong, reminding us of what marriage is about. So marriage for the procreation of children, for the unity of the man and woman, and for growing in holiness. And so he tells them that they're mistaken in their understanding of marriage because they say, which of these 7 will she be married to? And Jesus says, she won't be married to any of them, because when you get into heaven, there is no marriage, because there is no need for marriage in heaven. Here on this earth, we need marriage because we need to continue the species. We need to bring people into the church, and we need to grow in holiness. And marriage, the married couple, part of your role is to help each other to become holy. But when you're in heaven, you're there. You're not going to get any more holy than you're in heaven. So that is no longer needed. There's no need to procreate in heaven. And so, and the unity, you are fully united in heaven. You'll be more united with your husband, with your wife, with your spouse in heaven than you will ever be here on earth. You will love them perfectly. You will know them perfectly. And so there is no need for marriage in heaven. He says you will be like the angels. Every now and again when I'm doing preparing people for funerals, or people talk about a loved one who's died, I hear they're going to be they're now angels in heaven, and no, we don't become angels. We don't become angels. When we die, we don't become angels. We become like angels in glory, like angels in our immortality. So we're like them, but we are not angels. Angels are pure spirit. You and I, we are not pure spirit. We are body and soul, one thing together as human beings. We die when our bodies die, but our spirit, our soul lives on. And what Jesus is proclaiming clearly is that at the resurrection, when all rise from the dead, our bodies rise too. Our bodies rise too because you and I have been created one thing, body and soul. That's how God intended us to be. That's his plan for us. And so being in heaven without our body is not part, as it were, of the original plan. And so at the end of time, at the resurrection, we will become as we were originally created to be, body and soul. It's another reason why people speak about reincarnation. There is no reincarnation. There's not one life, two life, three lives, because you only have one body. And that's the one you'll be reunited with in heaven. You will not have 7 bodies or however many lives you think you might want to have. Only the one. And at the end of this life, it's judgment. Heaven, hell, purgatory. Not back here. Not back here. So Jesus speaks clearly about marriage and that there is no need for marriage in heaven. He also speaks goes back to them. They believe only in the Pentateuch, and this resurrection from the dead thing, this is a newfangled doctrine that's come up. And actually, although it's taught in the Pentateuch and Jesus brings them back to the Pentateuch, it wasn't clear. It wasn't a clear teaching. And so over time, the Jewish people came to understand that we rise again from the dead. And it was only around the time of the first reading, 200 years beforehand, that it became a clear teaching. Before that, it was, everyone would go to this place called Sheol. And was there a life after death? Was this all that there was? But Jesus shows actually that it's there at the root. Moses. When Moses meets God at the burning bush, God declares himself God the Father of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Those people who had been dead for a long time before Moses got there. And Jesus is saying to him, to God, Abraham, Isaac, and Moses are all still alive. He is the God of the living. He is the God of the living. If he is the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, rather than the God I was the God of, he said, I am the God of, present tense, they are alive in him. And so the Pentateuch, the Exodus, teaching us clearly that there is a resurrection from the dead. It's problematic for the Sadducees. It's problematic for them, this resurrection from the dead, because not having a resurrection from the dead is useful. It's useful not to have a resurrection from the dead. It's useful because if there's no resurrection from the dead, then it does not matter what I do. The Sadducees compromised with their faith. The Sadducees compromised with foreign powers over and over again, the kind of political powers. And because, as far as they was concerned, there was no resurrection from the dead, it didn't matter. Well, we can do bad. We can live how we want to. And there is no consequence to how we live. I can live a bad life, and that's okay. I can live a good life, and that's okay. It's my choice. It doesn't matter. But clearly it does matter if there is a resurrection from the dead. And the young men we hear about, the brothers, in that first reading, they clearly died knowing that they were dying for their faith and that there was a resurrection. They could go through the suffering that they were going through because they had something to look forward to in the end. Seeing the Lord face to face. And for that, they would willingly die. And at the end of the day, it is Jesus who proves the fact of the resurrection. Because he is the one that goes through that torture on the cross, that suffering and death, but then rises again on the third day so that you and I could experience that same resurrection. Through our baptism, we die in him, and through our baptism, we rise again with him to new life. This is the hope we have, so that we can remain faithful in times of trial and look forward to the glory of the resurrection, life eternal in the face of God.